It's the 26th of January as I record this video for you, and we can see we've had some solid downtrends here of Bitcoin. Some people say this is a head and shoulders. It's obviously the beginning of 2022 here, and it's actually a very similar pattern to what we saw. If we look here, the beginning of 2018, we had new highs and some pretty sustained drops before recovery. But let's go back a bit further, and we see the same thing again at the beginning of 2014, a month or two earlier actually. But as almost anyone in the space, in the crypto space, will tell you, crypto, because of Bitcoin, runs generally on 4-year cycles, and it's mainly driven by the fact that it's hard-coded into Bitcoin that it becomes 100% more expensive to create a single Bitcoin every 4 years. That's coded into it, and this results in it rocketing to seemingly silly prices before plummeting again, significantly correcting, dropping down pretty soon after, and then recovering over the rest of the 4-year cycle. Other cryptos have the tendency to follow that pattern on an even more exaggerated trend. Some people think we're in the down phase now, and others say we're still going higher before that down phase actually locks in. But whatever you think about that, this 4-year pattern is certainly very real, and it's not disappearing yet. So what's up with this DRIP project, and why is it rocketing when everything else seems to be crashing? So with lots of fear in the market, explanations about potential new regulation and bigger things going on in the world, just as happened 4 years ago, lots of people are worried at the moment. Lots of coins have been dropping significantly in value, at least temporarily, but maybe as the start of a longer trend. Of course, some projects will always buck a general trend because of specific characteristics about them. One of those projects, as we have touched on, for now at least, is DRIP. So as you can see here, we've been pushing up to very significant new all-time highs, over $100. Only a few days ago we were breaking the $100 mark, already up to 161. This is seemingly going vertical at the moment. How can that be sustainable? So the counter trend, as we saw earlier, very briefly, it's really clear from this image. Mapped against Bitcoin for the last 90 days, we are seeing its gains, and this is before the last few days have gone even higher. Those gains are almost reversing the pattern of losses of Bitcoin in US dollar terms. So we're going to look into how this project works, how DRIP works, so we can understand if it is just a blip or if it has real legs. So here is a general agenda of all of the stuff we're going to cover here, quite comprehensive, and so you can get an understanding and appreciate the potential and a lot of the risks as well, which isn't something you'll see on most of the other videos about this project. So first we'll touch on what DeFi is really quickly. Some of you know already, some of you don't. I'll give you a quick intro about that. We'll touch on that old cliche of passive income and whether DeFi and DRIP could potentially give you that, before diving right into the concepts behind DRIP. A case study of a friend who's made significant amounts of money from the project over the last 9 months, why you may not have heard of the project until now, whether it's just a Ponzi or a pyramid, how it might be different to other projects in crypto and DeFi. We'll touch on a quick how-to, a very quick overview. There'll be a detailed one at the end, and we'll look at the power of compounding, because it's very, very relevant to DRIP and how you use it and where the profits come from. We'll look into the supply and how that will possibly affect future pricing of DRIP, whether it will go up or down and to what extent. We'll investigate more about whether it has these Ponzi or pyramid characteristics, or whether there's something more here. We'll look into this relatively new announcement of a short sword and shield protocol that supposedly can protect DRIP's price during market downturns. we'll look into how whales are dealt with, whether the project can be protected from the big guys draining the contract and taking all of the profits and ruining it for everyone else. We'll have a look at how the referral income scheme works for those that want to promote the project and earn money from that. We'll have a really quick look at the reservoir, which is a kind of secondary part of the ecosystem. And then we'll look into what's coming next and whether those spin-off projects like the layer 2 and layer 3, the manor farm, animal farm, privacy bridges, exchanges, all of this stuff that the developer behind Drip says is going to create sustainable value, and how feasible that is, how likely that is. We'll explore what the catch is here, whether this is really too good to be true, before finally diving into a full how-to of how to prepare to get to Drip, how to get into DeFi if you don't know how to do that, and get a crypto wallet set up. And then, assuming that you have that, we'll look at actually buying Drip, depositing into the smart contract, and how to compound and potentially sell those daily returns. And finally, a quick look at some useful links and resources. So, what is DeFi? Well, it stands, if you didn't know, for decentralized finance. And really, it's just a type of finance that can be built by anyone, where literally anyone can be the bank by providing services to others, and in turn, anyone can actually use those services. So it's decentralized in that there is no central power in control of everything, deciding on monetary policy and rules, etc., and deciding who can make money and how. That's how DeFi works. Anyone can contribute. So think of it as a new financial system, one that we are building and this is, by we I mean anyone who wants to build to meet our needs, rather than being built by the financial powers that be and the regulators and the governments to maintain the status of those who are already wealthy and powerful. It's certainly it's not for everyone, because to use DeFi you have to actually take full responsibility for your money and looking after it. There's nobody who you can call to reverse your transactions if you do accidentally give your tokens to a scammer or lose your seed phrase, the passwords that give you access to your crypto in this space. But that is the price that you pay to move away from having to trust the institutions that have proven so many times that they can't necessarily be trusted. So let's look quickly at some of the differences between traditional finance and decentralized finance. In the center of these circles where they overlap, we see some examples of the types of financial products and services that we can see that are catered to by both traditional TradFi and DeFi products and projects. There's actually even more use cases coming through in DeFi that haven't previously been possible. We won't really get into those here, we'll just keep it simple. But let's look at some of the actual main differences between the two. So when it comes to custody of your investments, of your assets, of your finances, in TradFi, of course, it's the institutions that have custody, control and responsibility for safeguarding your assets. Many people appreciate and like that, but in DeFi you actually take control of that, so there's nobody to tell you what you can do with your money. You are responsible for your own money and what you do with it. For KYC in TradFi, you have to provide documentation and ask for permission to open accounts and to use the services. In DeFi, that generally doesn't happen, so there's no KYC, nobody holding your documentation, nobody that's able to abuse that documentation. It's KYC free in general, so you don't provide personal information to anyone, and that results in a permissionless architecture in DeFi as opposed to TradFi, where you have to get permission to open a bank account to use all of these services. So nobody in DeFi can stop you really from using these services. Customer service is generally provided by institutions in TradFi, but in DeFi it's either non-existent or very minimal, often provided by other people like you in the community. It's really up to you to understand what you are doing. So a little bit caveat emptor. If you can verify, if you can read programming language, if you can read code, then you'll be able to see exactly what these services are doing, or you can rely on other people to audit and confirm that there's, the projects are doing what they say they are. In terms of the creation of the products and services in TradFi, it's really only the institutions that are building these things. A very limited group of people. It's a very slow process. In DeFi, literally anyone can create and release a new DeFi service. You can actually view all the code of existing services and make little tweaks to make any improvements that you want. So this results in breakneck development and improvement of services, and that's one of the things that makes the space so exciting. But it also gives power to anybody to improve where they see there are issues and improvements that could be made. So can DeFi give you this cliched phrase of passive income? I hate using this phrase, but for sure you can earn money by taking part in the previously mentioned services and more. One of the main ways, I'll give an example, one of the main initial ways that you can earn money in the space is to buy tokens and pair them to enable others to swap and trade tokens. This is called a liquidity pool. And since one of the main things that people do in finance and in the crypto space is to swap one asset for another, one token for another, providing this service can actually be pretty lucrative. So people are providing this swap service as opposed to centralized exchanges like Binance. So, for example, if you took $100 of the US dollar stablecoin USDC, this is a token that is backed by real dollars in a bank account. If you took that token, $100 of it, and paired it with $100, an equal value of the Binance token, which is known as BNB, you can then provide that into something called a liquidity pool. And so if someone comes along to the decentralized exchange where you have put the tokens into their liquidity pool, for example, they want to buy one BNB and pay for that using $1 worth of USDC. Well, if you were the only person that had provided those tokens into the exchange, it would use your tokens to do the swap for that user. So it would take the $1 of your BNB tokens, and it would give you $1 of their USDC tokens in return. So instead of having 100 of each, you'd now have $99 worth of BNB tokens and $101 of USDC. So you're balanced out. I mean, there's obviously not much point in doing that. There's no return there. So on top of that, the exchange, in return for giving this service, will give you a share of the small transaction fee that they charge the user doing the swap. So you're actually now in profit. And this happens again and again and again with tiny bits of profit. And over the course of days and weeks and months, you can make pretty good return, often way in excess of what you would earn through depositing and saving money at your centralized bank. So in reality, there's not usually just one person putting their tokens into a liquidity pool, into a decentralized exchange for people to swap. There are usually thousands or tens of thousands of people doing that. So the fees get split proportionally by all of the people who are providing the tokens based on how many tokens they've provided. So all of those numbers get fractionalized. Instead of $1 of your BNB being taken, it would be a fraction of $1, and instead of the 1% fee potentially going to you, you would have the equivalent fraction of that fee shared with all of the other people in the liquidity pool. But the concept is the same. So there are all kinds of ways to earn money like this in DeFi, in ways that previously only banks could do. And I don't know about you, but I would certainly prefer ordinary people like us to be earning these fees and providing these services to each other in a trustless manner rather than the banks. Just a note on that point of trustless. It doesn't mean that you can't trust the people providing the service. It means that the code is there to take away the lack of trust, any problems of around trust. So you don't need to worry about trusting because the code handles that aspect of the services. So in a word, yes, DeFi can give you passive income. We've just explored one example. There are many, but you can't get higher returns than the banks will give you without making some sacrifices. You have to learn, you have to take on risk and responsibility for your money in DeFi and accept that this is a new and experimental space with a lot of scams and scammers inside it. It's not for the faint-hearted, and you'll need to commit some time to working it out, but it can be really, really worthwhile. So yes, DeFi can indeed give you passive income. You just have to be aware of the risks and spend some time learning about it and testing with money that you can afford to lose. So on to Drip now, and we'll look at a case study, a buddy of mine, and how he's seen some actually quite spectacular returns in the 9 months since it launched. So about 10 months ago, probably a bit sooner than that, there was a guy called Forex Shark. He was talking about his upcoming project in a Telegram group that me and a friend are in. His Forex Shark is a long-standing and high-quality contributor to that group and a few others that we're in. And I'd played around with a couple of his projects, BR34P and Rake, to varying levels of success. They were quite interesting. BR34P or BREEP was effectively a DAO or a club from which you would get early access to Forex Shark's future projects if you held some of the tokens. It was a spin-off of a similar project, similar DAO called Reap that lives on the Binance Smart Chain rather than the original which lives on Ethereum. Anyway, after a bit of investigation and discussion, we decided to dive in. My friend had just received quite a good amount of BNB tokens as profit after doing quite well by investing into another project very early on. So, we went in with varying amounts of money. For him, quite a large amount, 15 BNB, I think it was. This was between $8,000 and $9,000 at the time back then, about 9 months ago, and it bought him about 1,900 of the new tokens, Drip. When they arrived, the price had already gone up a fair bit, or pretty soon after, so he actually sold a few to claw back some of his investment, and then he deposited the rest into the Drip DApp. DApp stands for Decentralized App, by the way. And from that point, it was still unclear whether the Drip project would live up to its promise. We both were compounding. He compounded most days, but not all. The price went up and down, so he tried to cash out whenever the price was higher and compounded and reinvested when it was lower. So fast forward to now, and he must have cashed out more than $50,000. But the exciting part is that now he has more tokens than he actually started with, and the value of his deposits stands at more than $350,000, and every day it's giving him roughly $3,000, and at the rate of price appreciation at the moment, that's going even higher. So I've actually done the maths on his numbers, and if he had not sold the initial chunk and kept the original 1,900 and then compounded every day without withdrawing anything, his stash would now actually be worth, if we scroll down to the bottom, we're calculating here the 1% daily minus the 10% tax, which makes it kind of 0.9% profit. We're adding that to each of the rows here. If we scroll all the way down, to the 270-ish days since he got his original tokens, you'd see actually he would have 21,000 tokens, and those would be worth more than 3 million, and he would be collecting more than 20,000 tokens every day. Pretty insane numbers. As it is, as we've seen, he has, because he's been cashing out and he sold some, is only around this kind of level at the moment, but he's still getting several thousand dollars in returns. Pretty insane, huh? So what is going on with this project? It's certainly his best performing investment over the last year. In terms of percentages, it's one of mine. I didn't invest as much as him, but I think everyone that got in those early days, almost whatever strategy they've used, they will have done quite nicely at this point. So what is the concept? Well, in a nutshell, you buy drip, you swap BNB tokens for drip, you deposit them into the drip faucet page. The faucet then drips out. It pays you out 1% every day for, I think, up to 365 days, giving you a total 3.65 times the number of drips that you started with. So each day, when you get that 1%, or each week, whatever you want to do, however quickly you want to do this, you choose whether to hydrate, which means to reinvest your daily profits, or whether you want to claim them and cash them out. Now, of course, the value of drips change on top of the return, so you could actually make a lot more than 3.65x if the price goes up. You could make less than that if the price goes down. So you may be asking why you haven't heard of this project before, if it's so incredible. Well, it's fairly new. It's only 9 months old. That's a fairly long time in the DeFi space, but it's not a huge amount of time for a very new project like this to prove itself. So far, it's not really had much in the way of marketing. That's changing at the moment. It's been growing steadily and surely until recently, where it seems to have sped up somewhat. It hasn't been listed on CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko or any of the big listing sites, and at least not until recently. And of course, it is a DApp, a decentralized app. It is DeFi, which many people, even who are early adopters of crypto, are not really either aware of or don't use to any great extent, because it's a bit more complicated than what the most enthusiastic DeFi users would call boomer crypto. So boomer crypto is just the old type where you just buy tokens and leave them on an exchange. DeFi is really true crypto. It's properly decentralized, and it has use cases and applications. You can actually do things with it. Finally, people haven't been sure if this project is legit. Certainly I questioned it at the beginning. It was only the developers, seemingly very advanced knowledge and his track record and his openness that kind of overcame those doubts in the early days. So it's really started to catch attention in the last few days and weeks, and particularly in the last week, because it's really started to buck the market trend. So why is it so different? Well, I think the key factor is in the way that the smart contract works. 80% of drip tokens are locked. People can't panic sell as a result of that. They can't get their tokens out quickly to sell them, and they're motivated to reinvest. So it makes the project more likely to be here for the long term. It's been very, very well designed. So let's explore kind of what this means. Most projects tend to plummet when confidence dips, whether that's because of something about the project itself or the market generally. People start to flock out. This causes supply of the tokens to increase and demand for the tokens to fall at the same time, which of course results in the price of the tokens plummeting. And then when people see this is happening, more people follow, it's a negative reinforcement cycle, so the price goes lower and lower. Now, because of the way that it's structured, DRIP doesn't seem to me as though it's likely to suffer this fate, at least not at the same rate as other projects that don't have this locking up mechanism. And why is that? Well, because the liquidity is locked up, and since this is DeFi, you can look at the contracts to verify that it is locked up. At the time of recording this, it's something like 75-80% of the tokens are actually locked into the contract, and you can see that they're locked in for a certain period of time, and actually you can only withdraw 1% a day. So this means that even if everyone suddenly panicked about the value, the future of the DRIP project or DeFi and crypto, or the wider economy in general, only a small percentage of people that haven't locked their tokens into the contract for those daily rewards would be able to sell up. So it reduces the amount of supply pressure and reduces the impact and the potential for the price to drop. So this is both a good and a bad thing. Obviously, before locking into the contract, you need to be aware that you can't exit quickly once your tokens are in the contract. But that means the same thing for others. Other people can't do that either. And so any sudden panics can't upset the supply and demand equation, at least not in the short term. So this is a DeFi project. Some of the ways that you might measure a project are quite different here. Often you would just look at the market cap and the total supply and evaluate a project based on that. In this particular instance, the more important thing versus market cap is the circulating supply and the price. And this is because most of the supply is, as we've kind of discussed, it's not held by users, but it's locked into the smart contract. It's locked in and it can't easily be sold since it drips out just at that 1% per day. So this is the core of why it's different. There are all kinds of mechanics that are here to kind of enhance these core characteristics of the project and try and make it sustainable for the long term, compared to other projects that at face value might seem to be similar, but are probably arguably less sustainable. So we've looked at this 1% daily return, and this means that we need to understand the power of compounding and how this can affect your returns. So whether to compound or not to compound isn't really a question. It's widely quoted that Einstein said that compounding is the most powerful force in the universe. This example here, compound interest, is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. Now, he almost certainly didn't say this, but it's certainly true that it is very powerful. He could have said it, and it's a dramatically underestimated force in the world and in the world of finance. So just to ask yourself a question: if you invested $100 today and you were earning 20% annual interest on that $100, and you could choose whether to reinvest the interest each day or just once at the end of each year, would there be any difference in the amount of money you have after the end of a 20-year period? I think it's fairly obvious to many of us that there would be a difference, that you would have more from reinvesting on a daily basis. But let's just explore how much of a difference this simple action would make. So let's check out the SEC investor.gov website. We start with $100 initial investment. We're not adding anything to it monthly. We're not putting any more money in. The length of time we're keeping the investment going is 20 years. The annual interest rate is 20%, and the frequency at which we compound the returns of that 20% here is daily. If we calculate, we see that the result is in 20 years we will have just under $5,500. So let's do the same thing again, but here we'll compound the interest annually. We see that we have only just over $3,800. So just by doing one simple action, There's no difference in the annual interest rate. There's no difference in the amount of money we put in. The only difference is that we are reinvesting on a daily basis. We end up with roughly another 50% by taking that daily action of compounding. It's a really, really powerful force. So moving on to supply and pricing, we can see that we can increase the amount of drip that we have in this project, assuming that it is sustainable and it's long-lived. Let's explore the other factor that will affect the end price, the end value of our investment, and that is the price of drip itself. So the more drip we have, the more money we'll have, but the higher each drip is worth, of course. That's a multiplying effect. So one of the smart things about drip versus other fixed yield projects is that they kind of drip out from a fixed supply in a simple contract, and actually those contracts tend to get drained pretty quickly and destroy the entire project. Well, with drip we have a liquidity pool at the heart of it, and actually it makes it very difficult for the amount of drip to run out because of the effects of supply and demand. So we can see here a table that demonstrates what happens as the amount of drip in the contract drops. So if you remember earlier, we were talking about how you could pair two tokens into a liquidity pool, and people could either buy or swap one of the tokens for another. So as people buy drip and lock them into the contract, we would start off with a certain amount of drip and a certain amount of BNB. And if we assume that the price of BNB stays similar, then as we reduce the amount of drip, we increase the amount of BNB as one is swapped for the other. And with BNB staying at the same price as an assumption, we see that there's a significant effect on the price of drip. So we're currently, if we look at the drip website, we can see the current supply level. We can see the supply is just under 30,000, so it's just under this level. So that would mean that the drip price would be just over $130, and we can see that that is actually the case. It's $170. So if we assumed that we were at 30,000 and $130, by the time another 15,000 drips are purchased, the price would be up to 520, and you can see there's actually a pattern here. So as we half the number of drip, we have a quadrupling effect on the number of BNB and the same effect on the price. So the rule of thumb is that as you divide the supply of drip by X, you multiply the number of BNB and you multiply the price of drip by X squared. So if you divide by 2, you multiply effectively by 4, and every time that happens, the same thing happens again. And the effect of this in the long term, you can see that as the drip supply gets lower and lower and they get used up, the price becomes so high. What do you think would happen to the people that are holding drip in the contract? Are they going to reinvest, or are they going to cash some of those out because they're worried that the price might drop again? Well, I think that the higher the price goes, there would be a pressure for people to sell, and that would result in more drip appearing back in the contract and the price dropping down again. The same thing could potentially apply to people considering whether to buy in. So we've recently seen the price rocketing, and inevitably, at least in the short term, that means people might be reluctant to buy in on these kind of vertical green increases in price in the short term, and people may hold off until at least the price growth slows down or it reverses. So that reduces demand for drip at the same time as potentially the holders of drip are selling off. And so it has this kind of equilibrium effect that ultimately should mean that we're never really going to run out of drip in this contract. So I'd be surprised if anyone paying attention wouldn't be asking the question of whether it's a Ponzi or a pyramid. You know, this is this kind of action, this 1% daily return does kind of bring up this question. But the way that this supply and demand contract at the heart of DRIP works indicates that this might have been designed by someone who really understands crypto tokenomics. It does look a little bit like some of the Ponzi-esque or pyramid-esque projects out there, where you're just in a zero-sum game against others to see if you can take profits out of the contract before everyone else drains it. And you know, I say Ponzi-esque as to actual Ponzi's because even those projects are generally fairly upfront about what's going on, and people tend to enter knowing the risk, knowing what's going on, knowing that it's a zero-sum game, but having a play or a gamble anyway. I call them, many of them, honest Ponzi's, if that phrase doesn't sound too ridiculous, because as long as people know what they're getting into, there is no fraud there. Some of the projects, of course, are quite fraudulent and do hide what they're doing, so I'm not forgiving all of the dodgier projects out there by any means. But we've seen many of these pop up over the last year or 5, and I've played with quite a few of them with small sums, mainly out of interest to see how the code interacts with people's behaviour and to learn about game theory behind these projects. But having seen the coder of DRIP, Forex Shark, in quite a few groups over the last few years, it became clear that he wasn't the type of dev building those very basic scammy projects, and he was really well liked and respected in most of those groups. Not to mention, he would often pop up and provide some very handy and insightful and expert evaluations of other projects in a way that I haven't seen from many other people. He clearly has a really solid understanding of smart contracts and tokenomics, human behavior and psychology, and reward schemes, and all of these things that are essential to a successful crypto project, and that's based on years of dev experience building them himself. The Reap on Ethereum and Breep on the Binance Smart Chain and the Rake projects that he built before DRIP, they're far from mainstream, but they still exist. They have survived despite some big ups and downs in usage and price over the long term. And so where initially me and my buddy that went into DRIP thought that this might be another one of those, it seemed to be worth deeper inspection, and on doing that before the launch, it did seem at least to be quite different, and the performance since then over the last 9 months has really borne that suspicion out. So there are all kinds of mechanisms going on, and they seem to be popping up over time to improve the mechanics of the project. We won't get into them all, but the simple supply and price mechanism of the LP at the heart of it does mean that there's pressure for price to balance out before it either gets too drained or too full. So does this mean that the contracts can be drained? I think it's hard to see, without really deep investigation, or just waiting to see what happens, whether that can happen. With that high percentage of supply locked up in the long term, available supply is certainly low. So it seems at least to have some level of longevity. So let's look at whether it actually could be called a Ponzi. I think the short answer is that it does have attributes of a Ponzi, as many investments do, and attributes of a pyramid through the referral scheme. But a Ponzi is actually where someone promises to invest your money for a solid, good return. And instead of doing that, they just take money from other people, later investors, and give that to the early investors and fake the fact that they're making profits. It's deception is at the heart of a Ponzi. So those newer investors come in, they hear about the great returns given to the early investors, and they buy in, clueless that there isn't actually any legitimacy to the investment process. And that process repeats with more and more numbers as you go down the pyramid until so many users come in that we run out of potential new buyers. The whole thing collapses, and while the earlier investors have all made a profit, the last kind of level of investors are losing out, and there's still a huge amount of money pocketed by the operator of the scheme. So an example here is of course Bernie Madoff. With a pyramid, and a Ponzi is illegal in most countries. A pyramid scheme is normally not pitched as a type of investment scheme. It's more where you have a system where the early adopters are given sign-up fees from newer ones. It can be tied into products and services, but often only to a limited extent. The majority of the earnings tend to come from the signing fees. As you get more and more people on board, that money flows up to the top. But there's rarely any actual intrinsic value from these schemes. The profits from the products and services are greatly outweighed by these kind of sign-up fees from people seeing and getting excited by this huge opportunity. There's similar characteristics, but these are the kind of fundamental differences. So an example of this is Herbalife. They've been found to be a pyramid in the past, and despite being fined a huge amount, they're actually still running, and people are still buying and selling the products. I presume because they've adjusted the scheme so that it is deemed to be a legal multi-level marketing scheme now. I don't know the details of this, so forgive me if it's incorrect, but they certainly seem to have adjusted it, and they may now be deemed to be a valid business. So what is DRIP, and where does DRIP lie in the scale? Is it a legal Ponzi? Isn't it a legal pyramid scheme? Is it a legal multi-level marketing system? Well, I don't think it's really any of them. And regardless of whether it has some pyramid or Ponzi mechanics, it seems to be very honest and upfront. And at the end of the day, you can actually examine how all of the money flows. So the possibility of it being truly fraudulent seemed to be actually quite low. It doesn't stop people lying about what's happening with the project, but this kind of deception and fraud doesn't seem to be something you can really accuse it of. So there is an element of money in DRIP that flows up the chain through the referral system. But it's structured differently to almost any kind of MLM or Ponzi or pyramid that certainly I've seen. There is a tax when you buy and sell DRIP, and there are other taxes when you kind of compound, etc. The first example is that when you initially buy, the 10% of your initial purchase is taxed, and that is distributed into the project and up to people higher up in the chain than you, so generally to the person who has introduced you to the project. So that part, although it seems to be a lot, 10%, so far it seems to be perfectly sustainable. It's the first part of the reward scheme. There are others based on the kind of ongoing actions. So the big question is, how sustainable the entire project is. Is it going to peter out quickly? Does it have a long shelf life? Is it sustainable in ad infinitum, or is it going to kind of fall apart in the next few weeks or months? Well, I'd say in its current form, it doesn't seem to be sustainable in the very long term. The money, the value has to flow from somewhere, and at the moment it seems that it is only from new users coming in and in greater and greater numbers, and that money flowing up. So when those new users dry up, there's no new money to flow back into the system in the way that it exists at the moment. So you have to ask, do you think that sustainable value is going to come from somewhere in the future? Well, it's quite clear that Drip isn't intended to be a standalone project and isn't intended to continue as it is today. We've already seen some spin-off aspects pop up, and Forex, the developer, is talking about things like getting more usage and more volume than PancakeSwap, which is one of the biggest decentralized exchanges in the Binance ecosystem. So that's a big claim, but if that does happen, you can imagine that fees from the token swaps that we mentioned before and the other services that run on these types of platforms, being some of the biggest uses in crypto, could potentially start to bring a flow of sustainable value into this ecosystem and perpetuate it for longer. And so, again, although that is a big claim, they have so far in these early days achieved everything they've planned to with Drip. So while it does seem like a big ask, and it's right to be skeptical, it's not 100% out of the question that these things are going to happen. So if you doubt that this real value is possible, let alone likely, then you would have to say that Drip is, in its current form, probably unsustainable in the long term. And that means that you have to see it as more of a game, if that's your viewpoint, albeit one that's using real money and has real financial consequences. So of course, as always with crypto, as always with investment and gambling and anything involving your money, you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. And in this case, if you don't believe that these new spin-off projects are going to bring sustainable value, then you would have to expect that your chances of losing are higher than in a very clearly sustainable alternative. And the later you get in that case, the higher those chances are. And sure, the Drip forums and many of these other similar projects are full of people who laugh at anyone calling them Ponzi's or pyramids. They talk about how pretty much all investments are actually Ponzi's, and that you can only profit if more people buy after you buy. Of course, there is truth in that, but most investments do involve real value and are therefore more sustainable than ones that don't. So think about the motives of these people that dismiss the claims completely. They're obviously or very likely to be invested in Drip or those other projects and want and need more people to flow in after them, regardless of any concerns, to both sustain the system, sustain the flow of income, and push prices higher so that they can profit. So what's my call? Well, my call at the moment, and my position does change all the time. I'm studying and playing with the project, and certainly very interested to see how it mutates and grows and potentially improves. It is a project that certainly uses aspects and elements of pyramids and Ponzi type structures to grow, as do many very legitimate projects. And in its current form, I don't think it is sustainable, even though it has all kinds of clever mechanisms that do extend its expected lifespan. The dev is very smart, is capable of building features that could bring sustainable value into the ecosystem. So far, we're not there, but we are seeing some signs of moving in that direction, and there are likely several months for him to achieve that before it starts to unravel. It's really urgent that he does that. Bottom line, it's a risk. I only invested a small percentage of my pot into this to experiment and learn with, and while at times, certainly at the moment, I can be tempted to wish that I'd put more in, I think it was the right call not to do so into a project like this. And it's very easy to get excited during periods where a project is riding high, but those of course are the most dangerous times. Every time I've gone in at a time of high excitement, I've almost always tended to regret it. And so at the moment, I think this project is more of a calculated gamble and an endeavour about timing the situation right to make a profit, rather than being an actual investment. So we'll touch more on that aspect of things and get a final kind of analysis later on in the video. But for now, let's explore some of these mechanics that are supposedly protecting the price and helping to bring about profits. So there is a fairly recent announcement called the Sword and Shield Protocol, and supposedly this is here to protect DRIP's price when there are market downturns. So the Sword is this liquidity pool where DRIP tokens are paired against BNB tokens, the core token of the Binance Smart Chain, and then the Shield part of the protocol is pairing DRIP against the Binance BUSD stablecoin. So I haven't really looked into the code of this. I don't even know if it is code rather than a manual kind of process. And it's one of those things that if you saw claims like this in another project, you'd be right to think that it's just more BS designed to wow the naive and persuade them that this is a great project. And while that could be the case here, I wouldn't know until I've had more time to actually investigate. The chances are, I believe, lower than with other projects, simply because of Forex's track record and DRIP's track record in recent weeks and months. So the claim is that there is a stability pool that helps keep price up when BNB crashes and the market crashes. Normally that would mean the value of DRIP would drop alongside it. So as we've said, the Sword is DRIP with BNB. This supposedly helps DRIP to gain in value when BNB and the market generally are going up, and the Shield, this LP of DRIP paired with BUSD in liquidity pool, supposedly this helps DRIP to retain its value when BNB and the market generally are going down. So Forex Shark has been quite light on info on this. I can't find a huge amount on it, which of course is a red flag in and of itself. But let's see how this pans out and if more information comes through. Right now, it seems that it might be working. And for the record, here are a couple of quotes, some of the only details I can find about it, and they're not particularly helpful. Quote 1, "We get the benefit of BNB pumping on our native DEX, our native decentralized exchange, but when the whole market crashes and our DRIP on PCS PancakeSwap doesn't budge, it acts as a peg for our smaller pool, which is tied to the overall market through BNB to remain overall," I think it means retain overall stability. Second quote, "The majority of our liquidity will be in the form of BUSD, which acts as a shield against the wild swing of the markets that makes plebs panic," his words, not mine, sell, "but we will still have a nice little seed of BNB liquidity, allowing us some exposure to the overall market, which is positive overall as the market as a whole grows. It's the ideal situation. BUSD is our shield and BNB is our sword." Now both of those quotes are of course super vague. They're not massively helpful in understanding exactly how it works. So let's see how things have actually panned out as BNB has tanked along with most of the market. Let's look at this chart here. So here we see that while DRIP's price against BNB plummeted from October onwards, as BNB itself crashed 65%, this was supposedly before the Sword and Shield protocol was implemented. However, now that it has been implemented, BNB has crashed more than 50%, but DRIP's price has actually increased during that period. So it could have happened for all kinds of other reasons, but it's possible that this SNS Sword and Shield protocol may at least be partly responsible. Let's move on to another important topic on projects like this, and it's about whales and their potential to put huge amounts of money in and drain the contract and ruin things for the smaller players. So it's certainly smart to worry about a few players with larger amounts of money emptying out projects. I've seen it happen many times. I'm sure you have if you've been involved in crypto for any time. This is why DRIP has implemented a whale tax. And the way that this works is if your total DRIP claimed means that you're considered a whale, you own too much of the total supply of DRIP tokens, then you end up losing up to 50% of your withdrawals in addition to the usual taxes that are involved in DRIP. So these whale taxes don't just go to the devs, they go back into the ecosystem and help to sustain it in the long term for other people. So the tax that you pay is based on your total claimed amount. I believe the total supply is 1 million, so 10,000 drips gets you into the 1% of the supply bracket. Of course, those numbers could change as supply changes, but in general terms, if you have 1% of the supply, you would start to pay this tax at the 5% level. If you go up to 10% of the total supply, you would be taxed on your transactions 50% on top of the other taxes. So this really does help. It's good for the ecosystem for sure. Whether it's enough, we'll have to wait and see. But bear in mind, there's also a max payout on any account of 100,000 DRIP, which also helps ensure that, together with the whale tax, no participant in Forex's claims can sell out more than 3% of the total supply of DRIP, which again helps with sustainability. This ties together with the team referral rewards, meaning nobody can build the biggest team in the world and destroy sustainability through that account collecting too much of DRIP and being able to sell it and tank the price. So this is the big thing that makes the project look pyramid-esque. It's the referral income system, which seems to be partly responsible for its growth. So in that respect, it's a good thing, but certainly would throw up alarm bells to many people. So any project that runs this type of system does bring up alarm bells with me and probably anyone else who isn't a huge fan of MLMs and their kind of Ponzi pyramid nature. So MLMs, multi-level marketing systems, of course, are reward systems that benefit those who are already active in an ecosystem and pays them a reward in return for attracting new users into it. They can be sustainable and a very good thing, or they can be unsustainable and a very bad thing, depending totally on the design. Often the value all goes to the very first users into a project, the creators and the people very close to them. And new people coming in, despite being excited by the gains of those earlier adopters, they can find it very hard to make it worthwhile. And when they quit, again, the value bypasses them and goes up the chain to those big early founders and users. Now, I normally avoid all projects with MLM type structures, as it can just be too much work to calculate, where they fall on this sustainability curve, whether they're going to drain all the value out of the project, and whether it's worth even bothering to join if you come later on. So the chance of the entire project being some kind of scam, in my opinion, massively increases when it uses any kind of MLM structure, and it takes some effort to work out whether that's true. Sometimes it's not worth that effort. But when I saw DRIP had such a scheme, although I nearly decided to avoid it there and then, thanks to Forex's reputation in the Telegram groups that I'm in, I decided that might be a rash decision. And so did my buddy who has made so much money from this. So you may be the same as me, but take a look at how it works. The rewards do flow up through the levels, but only to a maximum amount, and it seems that they may be so well designed that they don't flood all of the money out of the project just to the early adopters. I don't have the time or the inclination to do proper calculations on it. That would take some effort, but Forex's claims that it has been designed to avoid the typical structural problems seem to be borne out, at least so far. So with the exception of the original launch partners, who have certainly made very, very nice amounts from the referrals, on top of huge price increases that they would have had from the pre-sale discount price 9 months ago to today, it does seem that anyone can earn a decent amount, at least at this point in time, without it draining the contract. So the way that it works is, when you join Drip, you have to choose a referral partner. You can't deposit money into the contract without allocating someone to receive the 10% tax. So that partner will benefit from a percentage of your purchase, and also potentially future compounding and other actions that you take over the ensuing days and months. So they'll also benefit from a smaller percentage of any people you sign up, as long as they qualify. And how far down that chain of future participants of the project their rewards go, how far they extend, is based on how many of Forex's original BR34P token, the BREEP token, that you hold in the wallet that your referral code comes from. So we can see here in this chart, if you have 2 of those tokens in your wallet and someone signs up using your wallet address, then you would earn from that person. If you wanted to earn from anyone that person brings into the project, you would need to have 3 BREEP tokens, and so on, all the way down to 15 levels, at which point you would need to have 1,600 of those tokens in your wallet. Now, it's actually done on a round robin basis. So for every action, only one person in the higher chain receives a reward. So it's not like you'll be earning from every single person on this 15th level every time they take money. That would really be unsustainable. So if you want to hear more about how that works, you can listen to some of Forex Shark's AMAs on YouTube and elsewhere. But ultimately, the more of these tokens, these earlier tokens you hold, the more levels your rewards come from. And that is a nice touch. It does show that Forex is designing later projects to help boost the value of earlier projects and reward people's loyalty to those projects. And just as we'll touch on shortly with the next projects coming through after Drip, Mana Farm and Animal Farm, etc., it looks like they will be benefiting Drip also, and in turn Drip is benefiting those who remain loyal to the earlier tokens and projects. So it does give you some comfort that this is not just a short-term flash in the pan, pump and dump, that this is an attempt to build a kind of ongoing sustainable ecosystem. And certainly I've seen people jump ship from the BREEP ecosystem in the short term when prices have plummeted. That's what people do in crypto. People have short attention spans and low levels of patience because of all the opportunity around. But in this case, people have missed out in the long term. This token has gone from a very small amount of money to worth hundreds of dollars now. So they have missed out in this sense. So arguably, people should have been buying more when those projects reduced in price, because it did always say that Drip was going to restore the value to those tokens, and those promises have actually come true at this point in time. So just a quick overview of these 2 distinct bonuses, as we kind of touched on before. The initial bonus is a round robin bonus. It applies to direct accounts, so the one person one level down from you that puts your wallet address into the platform when they first buy and deposit, you'll get a 10% bonus after tax. If you are a standard wallet, if you have 5 people in your team, then you actually only get 7.5%, and 2.5% gets pushed down. So this means that the bigger referrers actually end up getting a smaller amount per person. And again, this is designed to help the sustainability of the overall ecosystem. The second type of reward is this hydration bonus, which is also on a round robin. So this can be collected all the way down to these 15 levels, depending on how many of the BREEP tokens you have. Again, as I said, it's a round robin. So if a person at a particular level takes an action, there's only one person in these levels above that will get that reward. And so you can imagine there's lots of people at this kind of 15th level, often in people's networks, in people's teams. So even though it's on a round robin, you will probably get quite a few rewards as time goes on. So certainly if you'd purchased, we'll just touch on this BREEP topic again. If you'd purchased in April 2021, when DRIP launched, you'd currently be up from $25 to $200 on the BREEP token. Although actually there was a time here when you could have actually sniped it for something like $3.70 when it was, you know, really oversold. So that would be a phenomenal 55x return. If you think that DRIP does have longevity, and it may not, of course, then you'll realize that a big use case of the BREEP token is that you need to lock it up to remain entitled for your DRIP referral rewards. This is a common theme in crypto. The more tokens people lock up, then the lower the supply and the higher the price tends to go. So, you know, this means with this token, as long as those rewards are coming in from your kind of recruits further down the chain, the downward price pressure on the BREEP token is going to be low. People are going to want to keep it to keep those rewards coming in. So as always, you know, it's dangerous buying on these current highs. But, you know, I just point this out more as a general note that Forex does seem to think in the long term and about returning value from new projects by building out the overall ecosystem. And the value flows up from new projects into previous ones. So my personal takeaway is that I do take his claims on trust about the prospects for projects more than a new project from an unknown dev, because pretty much all of his promises so far have borne out to some extent. And so, you know, I've done fairly shallow investigations into the structure of the referrals and his claims about the sustainability of the referral rewards, but they have so far, you know, been borne out by the success of DRIP and the effect on the other tokens. But remember, on this topic, you certainly don't have to get involved in referrals to benefit. My buddy hasn't, and I haven't, and we've still made pretty good percent returns at this point in time. So onto the reservoir. How does this work? Well, we'll go into this more in other videos based on demand, because it's not at the core of DRIP, and I haven't really used this side of the project. It's more of a yield farming approach where you can provide liquidity, as we've touched on, by pairing DRIP with BNB and getting returns on that. So the reservoir is a different way to actually get a form of passive income, as with the faucet, which is at the core of DRIP, where you just lock in DRIP on its own. You know, you get a reward as time goes on, and you can choose to claim those rewards and cash out, or to compound them and build up your deposits. So in this case though, unlike with the faucet, you don't earn a fixed percentage. You don't earn that 1% each day. You actually get a share of the taxes paid by other users. So your returns will actually vary dependent on other people's usage. The 10% withdrawal and deposit taxes get split up in the reservoir, and they get distributed to different places. So 5% goes into the reservoir pool itself, 3% go into the liquidity pool, and 2% is distributed to the players who have deposited into the reservoir. So it also those are split not just based on the percentage of tokens you have in the reservoir, but if you've been in there for longer, you actually get weighted a little higher and get a higher reward. As I said, we can explore this in other videos, but that's just a quick overview. So, what's the catch? Before we dive into how to actually properly get involved, if you want to have a play with this project, let's think about what the catch is and whether it really can be sustainable in the long term. Because 9 months is a lifetime in DeFi, especially for a contract like this that is giving these fixed daily yields. But if you wanted to, if you were the dev and you wanted to rug pull, there's certainly more value in playing the long game and gradually convincing more and more people to risk more and more of their money. So you certainly have to be wary, just because we've seen multiple projects from Forex Shark, and he seems to be trustworthy. You've always got to be careful about any project, of course. And as always with DeFi, since we're so early, generally there could be code exploits, regardless of the dev's trustworthiness, that mean that even if he isn't shady, others may be able to find and exploit flaws and drain the contract. So moving on from those two initial concerns, you do have to ask where the long-term flow of value comes from that can allow this to really sustain. So without that value coming from elsewhere, from inherent value provision, it really does resemble some of the key characteristics of a Ponzi or a pyramid, namely that returns for earlier investors are generated with money taken from later investors. And you could argue, of course, that that's true of the stock market generally, but we're talking about a specific project here. Value has to be created for it to flow to all investors long term. And without new ways for value to be created, you would have to question the project. But we are seeing things like farms pop up, the manor farm, the animal farm, which is an ongoing launch at the moment, and taxes flowing into drip. But that could just be pushing back the point at which everything falls apart. At the moment, it's too insular to be considered truly sustainable. But looking at the project, if you were the dev, you'd have to be looking at things like building exchanges and other services into this ecosystem so that fees from other non-drip projects could flow into drip. And of course, you always have to be skeptical that the developer is going to recognize this fact and going to take action on it, and most importantly, is able to succeed at those attempts. But if you listen to Forex, for example, on the AMA he's just done on OXRJ's YouTube channel, and if you do watch that, be careful about relying on the price predictions that are bandied about. You'll hear that actually both the first and second point that I just mentioned are actually already checked off. He does recognise that this needs to be done, and he is taking action on this, or at least he says he is, and we can see some of the manifestations of that already coming through. So the third part, whether he will succeed at this, is of course the hardest part, but you have to respect his abilities based on what's been done so far, and at least give him a chance of succeeding at building in this truly long-term sustainable value flow. So you can look at drip and say it's only hype, but actually he recognises that aspect of things at the moment. And to quote or paraphrase him, he mentions in that AMA that there are 3 phases that are key to getting a project to succeed. The first being hype, the second being sound tokenomics and logic in how the contract runs, and 3 being real use cases. So once again, 1 and 2 have so far already been a solid success for Drip and for Forex. He's actually achieved those 2 in reverse order. The logic of the code, in my opinion, has brought amazing results in the first 9 months that are now leading to hype and excitement in the space. And I think it's clear that Forex recognises what's actually needed now for this sustainable long-term value. He's likely known that all along, and he is working on it. To quote or paraphrase, he said that a continued evolution and onboarding of use cases of innovation to create additional demand that fill market demand. He also talks about partnerships, a few of which do seem to be coming through. I won't go into those, but some of them sound quite interesting. But unless and until that real value has been built in, you do have to treat this to some extent as what it seems to be, and that's a project where you're only going to profit from being early, and therefore treat it as a fun experiment or a game for now at least, bearing in mind that it has significant potential to be a lot more. So it's hard to not go overboard when you see people making large amounts of money in the short term, especially in the current tough environment for all of us. And I can't give financial advice. This has just been an exploration of what I think is one of the most interesting DeFi projects out there, and it's only for educational purposes, so be careful. So what is next? We touched on some of these new spin-offs that potentially could bring value into Drip, and let's see what the prospects are. Again, these topics are somewhat outside the scope of this particular discussion, but they are worth a quick mention. They're part of the Drip ecosystem, but they do seem to be designed to add value to the Drip price. The Mana.farm has been around for some weeks now. It's now closed, and it's transitioning into the animal farm. So you may well spot an all-well theme here, and it's about returning ownership from the centralized farm owner to the means of production, and that is a meaningful theme. The idea is that the participants in the animal farm will have ownership of a yield farm with lending features and other features to come. It hasn't been fully explained just yet, but it does seem to be a way for people to build up value through their investments, and then to not have to sell that value in order to use it. There are many references to this being how the wealthy run their finances when you listen to Forex Shark talk. There will be two tokens on the animal farm, the dog and the pig token initially. I believe that you will be locking in the dog token, farming the dog token with other tokens. The dog being the smartest animals in Orwell's book, Animal Farm. And with those dog tokens, you'll earn pig tokens. These are the ones that actually represent ownership of the platform and give you governance and, I believe, a flow of value from all transactions on the animal site as it builds out these future use cases. So Animal Farm, as I speak, is just in the process of whitelisting people for a chance to get a discount in the second stage of its pre-sale, and it's actually due to launch and fully go live in the next few days. We'll see how it works. We'll explore that in other videos, and we'll work out just how much value is flowing into Drip. There's also a new use case coming for Rake, which is another old token, one of the ones that I'd used before. It's fallen out of usage in the last month, but again, this demonstrates a commitment to delivering value for those who stick around and keep the old tokens. So Rake, since that announcement, has been rocketing in value too. Finally, Forex is also building bridges to move tokens from one blockchain to another, but as always seems to be bringing a kind of new innovative approach, privacy, so that when you're moving tokens from one to another, you potentially don't know who's been moving the tokens across. That's something that seems to be a few months away at least, but it is a big use case in crypto, so it does have a lot of potential to deliver value, but details at the moment are pretty few and far between. So on to how to actually properly use Drip, how to get into it. We'll start with preparing to get into Drip on the assumption that you haven't used DeFi before. You perhaps don't have a crypto wallet such as MetaMask. If you do, you can fast forward to the next section. But for now, we'll explore how actually to get started. So first of all, this is DeFi. This isn't something that you can do through Coinbase or Binance's standard exchanges. Those are centralized, they are permissioned, and they can't generally interact with DeFi projects and decentralized apps or dApps. So we're not going to go heavily into detail on wallets and blockchains here. You can find more about that elsewhere, but here is a quick overview. So you do need to use a proper crypto wallet, the most popular being MetaMask. So you can either access MetaMask on as a mobile app on iOS or Android, or if you're on a computer, you can download extensions that work with Chrome or Firefox or Brave or Edge. Now the website here at metamask.io/download is recognizing that I'm on the Chrome browser at the moment, and clicking the button there you will come to this page. Now I actually have MetaMask installed already, so it's only given me the opportunity to remove it, but if you haven't got MetaMask already, this will be install to Chrome. Once you've done that, it appears on your browser bar as an icon, and when you click the icon you will be asked to go through a process of creating your unique crypto wallet. Now you've got to be super careful when you're creating the wallet. It will step you through a process, and it will give you 12 or 24 keywords, and those keywords together make up what's called your seed phrase, and you have to guard that seed phrase with your life. If you lose it, there's no one that can get it back for you, and there's no way you'll ever be able to get back into your wallet. So all of your tokens, all of your investments, no matter how much they're worth, will be lost forever. On the other hand, if you store them and someone else finds them and realizes what those keywords are, that they do constitute a key phrase for a crypto wallet, then anyone will find it very easy to actually get full access into your crypto wallet and will be able to drain your account. And again, there is no one to reverse those transactions. So be very careful with that seed phrase. Be very careful about sending it in unsecure networks like messages and emails, etc. But also, if you keep it on paper, make sure that you put it in a very, very safe place that isn't easy for someone else to find. I tend to split up my codes and put them in very kind of obscure places where you can only combine multiple documents to get the seed phrase. You need to work out how to do it. You may just give your code to two different people, whatever. Be very, very careful with those seed phrases. Also be careful with what's known as your private key. So that's another way to get full access to your wallet. The only thing that you should ever be sharing is your public wallet address, which is here. You can click on this to copy that to the keyboard, and that particular piece of code is very safe. If ever you pop onto a website and it's asking you for your private key or your seed phrase, do not trust that website. This is almost always a scam. This is one of the most common ways for people to lose their crypto. Just guard that information with your life. So once you've got your wallet, you will then need to populate it with BNB. So you can see here when I pop up MetaMask, I have some BNB tokens in my wallet. The best, easiest way to get those, if you have a Binance login, a Binance account, is to buy the BNB token on Binance. So if we come here to the markets and we find the BNB token, we can trade that token and buy it using the USDT token. This is a commonly held token, or you can just go into the buy crypto section and potentially buy on your credit card or with fiat. Make sure that you choose the BNB token here and buy however many you want. The current value of BNB in US dollars as we write this, is $377. So that's how much it will cost you to buy one BNB, and that will buy you several drip tokens at the current price as I make this video. But by the time you're watching this, it might be even higher, or it might have gone down in price. So once you've bought your BNB token, you need to go to your wallet in Binance, go to the fiat and spot section, again we'll search for the BNB token, go to withdraw, and we're going to withdraw this into your MetaMask account. So you can see here it's asking for the address first. So we go to MetaMask, we click on here, copy to clipboard, we can paste, and we can see it's recognized the network. Now just double check, depending on which token you're withdrawing, there could be multiple networks. Because this is BNB, we're only currently given the Binance Smart Chain, the BEP20 blockchain. That is the correct thing. It's popping up here, making sure that we know what we're doing. Yes, we definitely want to, in this case, withdraw the BNB token to our MetaMask address over the Binance Smart Chain. So let's assume we bought that one BNB. You type that here, click withdraw, go through whatever security processes you have, and then a few seconds or a few minutes later, you'll be able to check here in the MetaMask pop-up, and you would see in the activity section a deposit, and the one BNB would pop up in here, minus whatever small fee the Binance network will charge. So you can see here it's a fraction of a BNB. So once you've done that, you're ready to get into Drip and to purchase your first token. So let's assume you've got your MetaMask or other crypto wallet all set up. You have some BNB tokens in your wallet ready to buy Drip. So let's explore how to do that now. So the first thing you'll do is come to drip.community/fountain. That's the swap page, and here let's assume that we've sent one BNB. You will then be able to purchase Drip here. You'll click the buy button. MetaMask will pop up with an approval request. Let me just show you that with a smaller amount, because that's all I have on this particular wallet at the moment. We click buy. MetaMask is asking for permission to spend 0.05 of our BNB in this case. Now we see something called an estimated gas fee. Now this is a transaction fee, if you like. This is what you have to pay to the Binance network in return for processing your purchase order for your Drip tokens. You can see it's a very, very small amount, but for this reason you always need to keep a little bit of BNB in your wallet, otherwise you will be stuck, unable to go. A bit like having a car with no gas in. You always need some gas, so you always need some of the BNB token. If everything looks correct here, we're seeing the 0.05 plus this 0.000667 totaled up here. This is the total of what we're going to spend, and you would press confirm. And once you do that, you'd wait a few seconds and you'll get a pop-up saying that you have purchased your Drip. In my case, because I cancelled, it didn't go through, but you would get a confirmation here. Once you've done that, your Drip balance here would increase, and you'd be ready to actually deposit your tokens into the faucet. So we can see here I have a total on this account of 2.251 Drip tokens. It's showing us the dollar estimated value at the moment, and we can see how much I've claimed in the last week or two since I created this account, and we can see the maximum payout if I was to collect every day for the next 365 days and this is a multiple of the deposits. As we saw before, your max payout is 3.65x the number of drip that you have deposited, and so that is the max that I could pay out if I don't invest anymore, and if I don't hydrate or compound or reinvest my future profits. That's the most I would get. So roughly every day you'll get 1% of this amount. So if we're talking about $382, 24 hours later, if we assume that the drip price hasn't changed, we would be expecting to see about $3.82. So we can see here this it's been just over a day since I last collected or reinvested my drip. So this is where this is the figure that pops up at about the rate of 1% of your drips every day. So your choice is whether to reinvest or whether to claim and cash out your profits. So let's reinvest here and see what happens. Again, here we can see we're paying the gas fee, we're paying a tiny transaction fee in return for 0.029. We're spending, kind of 1% of that value, so it's worth doing even for this $5 amount. If we click confirm, it takes a few seconds and we'll see that deposit, claimed and max payout amounts will change. We're currently on 2.251 deposits. And we can see that the compounding has succeeded. You can click on this link here to get a kind of transaction receipt. And we can see we've gone up from 2.251 to 2.278. We've got a little bit more in there. My max payout and my claimed amounts have also increased. And so we can see we've learnt about the power of compounding. If we compound 1% a day, then the amount of our deposits will double in kind of less than 90 days because of that compounding effect. And then if the price of drip, we can see the current price here, if that increases as well, then we would be making much bigger profits. So that's it really. It's all pretty simple. There are all kinds of strategies. Some people just claim every day and stick with the 3.65. Some people hydrate constantly for 80 or 90 days to double their deposits and then start claiming. Other people will hydrate kind of 2 days out of 3 or 4 days out of 5 and claim on the other day. It's all dependent on how risky you think this is and how much you want to build up your drip, how long you think the project is going to last, and what you think is going to happen to the price. But that's the essence of the project. So before you make your first deposit, you'll see I've got a current buddy assigned. If you haven't added a buddy, you'll see a text box here where you have to paste someone else's address that's in the drip ecosystem and add them as a buddy. Before you do that, it will not let you deposit. So you'll be charged a 10% tax when you deposit, and that 10% will go to your buddy, whoever has recruited you. That's the reward system that we have explored elsewhere. Once you've done that, you can deposit and you're into the system, and then you can't change who your buddy is. So that's it. We've had a pretty wide-ranging review of the project. If you think this is something you want to find more about, if you think you want to have a play, head over to this useful website, driptoken.tech. It has links to some of the key introductory articles and videos from all kinds of people, including the official drip tutorial. And good luck, and be careful as always in crypto before you go full degen.